My name is Kevin Fernandez and welcome to my channel, Gamer's Genie. Today we're going to play the train riding game, Train Line, designed by Ryan Taylor and published by Replay LLC. And this is a 2 to 4 player game, by the way. Let's go downtown Chicago and jump on the L, but it's really tough to get a seat. But we can try. Will we be able to get all our guys seated in time? Or will we be left in the dust and sad that we'll be missing our meeting? Find out as we go to the table and learn to play Train Line. Pick 2 train tiles and place them together on the table, matching up long sides or short sides. For our game, we're going to be playing short sides. Shuffle and place the number card deck and action card deck next to the train tiles in reach of all players. Each player chooses a color and picks the required amount of pawns based on the number of players. If you're playing with 2 players, then you get 12. If you're playing with 3 players, 10. And if you're playing with 4 players, then you just get 8. For our game, we're going to be using 12 because we have 2 players. Each player draws 3 action cards, 2 number cards, and 3 discard chips. The player who last rode on a train takes their first turn. And that completes the setup. Before we get started with gameplay, let's take a look at what some of the cards in the game do. First, we have Enter 1X. This card allows you to take any pawn not on the train, including from the start space, and place it in a seat. Then we have Enter X2. This card allows you to take 2 pawns that are not on the train, including from the start space, and place it in a seat. After that, we have a card called Excuse Me. This card allows you to get past a seat passenger and opposing players' pawns in the aisle to get to spaces on the train. You can also use an Excuse Me card to slide opposing pawns over to an agency under the following conditions. The player is not next to a passenger, and you have the number to land on the seat in which the opposing pawn was originally seated. You never count the space that you got past while moving. After that, we have the card You Pass. This card allows players to board a train without using the board die. You must board the train after this card was played, even if you're about to get penalized. After that, we have Advanced Motion. This card allows you to play mismatched number cards and increase the amount of spaces you can move on your turn by the motion plus number, the number in the circle right here. The motion plus number on this card can be used as a standalone number card if you don't wish to combine with the number cards currently in your hand. Now we have Take a Seat. This card allows you to move one of an opposing player C pawns into the aisle and move one of your pawns that is not on the train, including from the start space, into the seat opposing pawn previously occupied. You can target any player. You are allowed to play more than 1 during your turn, but you should target different players or you will penalize yourself. And last, for this series of cards, we have a Rebel Passenger. This card can nullify any card that can remove you from a seat or out of your hand and can be used to get by opposing pawns and passengers, like the Excuse Me card. Rebel Passenger must be played immediately after the opposing player's action card to nullify it. The only action cards exempt from the Rebel Passenger is the Express card and Reverse card. Special note, Rebel Passenger can be a turn and or card only if used as an excuse me card substitute when it's currently in your hand, but its primary ability occurs during the opposing player's turn, who attacked you with action cards, which are Take a Seat, Eccentric Passenger, Exit 1 and 2, Red, and we'll talk about those later, and can handle her passenger. Sorry. Action cards are special ability cards that can help you gain the advantage in your quest for victory. More than one action card, except U passes, can be played during your current turn. There are 14 action card types divided into two categories: turn keepers and turn enders. Turn keepers are indicated by a green star on the card and allow you to continue your current turn after any of these action cards have been played. Turn enders are indicated by a red star and will conclude your turn after any of these action cards have been played. Strategize your moves wisely. Your turn ends when you move your pawn or roll the boarding die. Exit 1x Red. This card allows you to remove the next clockwise counterclockwise player's seated pawn off the train. Exit Red times 2. This card allows you to remove 2 of the next clockwise or counterclockwise player's seated pawn off the train. Express. This card skips the next clockwise or counterclockwise player's turn. Bonus turns: if you express all of the opposing players in one turn, you are allowed to take a bonus turn with newly acquired action and number cards. This card can't be blocked by a Rebel Passenger. Any action cards played subsequently will affect players clockwise and counterclockwise from the player who was skipped. Reverse. This card reverses the turn order counterclockwise or clockwise for all players playing the game. This card can't be blocked by a Rebel Passenger card. This card also reverses the clockwise order of the opponents that are affected by action cards. Tip: combinations of express and reverse can enable you to target any opponent. Eccentric Passenger. This card allows you to move an opposing player's pawn into the aisle. You can target any player. Tip: if you decide to play more than one during your turn, you should target different players or you will penalize yourself. So, just like I told you earlier, there was a similar card before. Panhandler Passenger. This card allows you to pick an action card or number card from any opposing player's hand of choice. The player who lost a card can replace the card they lost during your opponent's turn, or wait until their turn. This card can be blocked by a Rebel Passenger. You can target any player. If you play multiple Panhandler Passenger cards, you can take from the same player or different players unless blocked by a Rebel Passenger. And last but not least, +1 discard chip. This card allows you to add an additional discard token. Tip: if there are no more discard tokens after this card was played, you're allowed to substitute with coins or buttons. At the beginning of your turn, move up on to any start space on the board. Roll the boarding die and see if you can make it on the train. If you open door, you do. Closed door, you don't. If you don't make it on the train, move your pawn to the missed train space, right here. On your next turn, you don't have to roll the boarding die. You can automatically enter the pawn that missed the train, so you can just... Players cannot jump to another start space on the train. Players will have to enter on the start space that you set your pawn previously after missing a turn. Once your pawn is seated, you may move another pawn to the start space. Wait to roll until your next turn. Play number and action cards to move onto the train along the aisle into an empty seat. You may occupy the same aisle as an opposing player, but may not pass them without an excuse me or rebel passenger card. You can play one number card or both if you have matching colors. You are not allowed to play mismatched colors without an advanced motion card. Each player is allowed maximum of one pawn in the aisle at any given time. You are not allowed to board a new pawn from the start space if you have a pawn the aisle. If you board a new pawn from the start space without seating the pawn in the aisle first, you will lose both pawns you boarded in that turn. If you cause your opponent to have more than one pawn in the aisle from action cards such as take a seat or eccentric passenger, your opponent would seat both pawns in the aisle, and you would lose any seated pawns you gained during the penalty. Some of the seats are already occupied by passengers printed on the board. Navigating around them into empty seats is the same process as navigating around the pawns of other players. In order to move around seated passengers, you must play excuse me or rebel passenger cards to move to the seat next to them or behind them. At the end of your turn, you should have 3 number cards and 2 action cards. Use discard tokens to change your cards. At any point in time, you can play discard tokens to discard any unwanted cards and redraw from the corresponding deck. At the end of your turn, you should have 3 number cards and 2 action cards. Use discard tokens to change your cards. At any point in time, you can play discard tokens to discard any unwanted card and redraw from the corresponding deck. The number cards range from 1 to 5 and come in 2 colors, blue and red. You have the option to play one card or both if the colors on both cards match. You can't play both number cards if the color doesn't match unless you have an advanced motion action card. At the end of your turn, you should draw cards until you have 2 number cards and 3 action cards. You are allowed to place your pawn to cut off an opponent's movement. If the opposing player's pawn cannot move for 2 turns, the player who is blocking will have to remove 1 seated pawn from the train each additional turn. At any point in time, you can play discard tokens to discard any unwanted card and redraw from the corresponding deck. You may discard and redraw 1 card per token. You may play more than 1 token at a time. The +1 discard card allows you to gain more tokens. Play continues clockwise in order until someone has seated all their pawns and wins the game. And that's all you need to know to play Trainline, the Chicago edition. Now, before we move on to the rest of this ending, I just want to point out this is the board that we showed you in our setup and everything. All 4 boards are double-sided. There are 4 boards with this that will be coming with this game, and they're double-sided, which I think is really cool. And when this game is fully made, I think they should keep that because I love double-sided boards. It's very cool. So, if you found us on Kickstarter, feel free to check out our channel and the rest of our content. If you found us on Gamers Genie's YouTube channel, feel free to click on the link in the description below to the Kickstarter page for this game and help it become a reality. Really consider becoming a backer. I think this is a good game. But if you need to follow him, Replay LLC, on social media, I'll put links in the description below for that. If you have any questions about this game, put it in the comments below. And I will also put links to my social media pages as well. Thank you for your time, and we hope to see you in some of our next videos. But until then, thanks for the views.